So I thought I would show you guys how I applied for the Fulbright, which I got. My application, just how the application process works. Hopefully this kind of stuff would help anyone who is looking at applying, thinking about applying, currently applying, anything like that. So before we go through everything, we should start with the Fulbright program and the website. If you're interested in just what Fulbright is, I have another video on that. So I won't really be going into that. But in terms of the application, you probably, if you're associated with a university, you're going to want to talk to your awards advisor. Mine basically told me what Fulbright was. If you're applying through your university, you have to be affiliated, so they will put your name in, essentially. And each school is different. You may have to jump through a few more hoops than I did. I basically just said, yes, I would like to apply. And they're like, okay, we'll recommend you. But so on the Fulbright website, there are countries, there's applicants, there's this whole section on getting started, the online application, etc. I'm sure you've already seen that if you're now on YouTube looking for similar resources. So I'm going to walk you through what I did. So basically, I first had to pick which country I wanted to go to. And so instead of focusing on countries, I focused on the different projects. And so I went through, I was like, okay, we'll look at Europe. And I just kind of went through everything. So I went into award search. And essentially, I went through all of them. I was like, does this look interesting? I was not interested in the English teaching assistant, so, we can go over here, get rid of that. I just want study research. And so I went through, I looked at them all, I looked at what it involved. I knew I wasn't doing a master's program. I was applying really, really late. I had a little under 2 weeks before the application was due when I realized it was something I was going to be applying for. And so that's way not enough time to pick a university program, apply, get accepted, because you need that letter of acceptance for most of these. So I ended up looking for open study / research. We went through and I picked a few interesting ones, suggested them to my awards advisor, and she's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. She did specifically say that the UK ones are difficult to get into, and so she was like, don't apply to it. You won't get in. It's too late. You have 2 weeks. That's not enough time. I don't know how much time you really need for that. I mean, I feel like if 2 weeks isn't enough time, how much time it is. But whatever. Honestly, reach for the stars. Whatever you want to do, freaking apply for it. You can only apply for one, so make sure you really want to do it. So we're going to go to the one that I did. So we're going to go to Ireland. And so there's a lot of different awards. I have the Open Study / Research Award. Oh, actually, something interesting here. You can see how many of each thing you get. So this one is for Dublin City University Taught Master's Program Award. So if you're going to DCU and you're doing a master's program where they teach you, you could apply for this award. I did this one because it's not associated with the university. And once you're looking at the award search, that will bring you to this sort of page. You'll see all of this information, so you can see when you start and how long it can be and what degree you have to get in. There's just a lot of information on here. Candidate profile, they're usually pretty similar. They're yeah, you have to be exceptional. Accepted stuff. Foreign language proficiency, that's an important one. If you speak other languages other than your first language, if you don't, you need to be sure that you meet those requirements. And then affiliation, that was a huge thing for me. I had issues getting an affiliate because I only had 2 weeks. And so there's this thing, letter recommended but not required at deadline. So you're going to want to find somebody in your country who is willing to say, yes, I will be your affiliate for your project. You don't necessarily need it by the deadline, but as we'll get to later on, if you become a semifinalist, you then need it. And then if you're doing graduate, you do need the letter of acceptance prior to the grant start. You can see how much your affiliation fees, tuition, etc. So you do get a tuition fee waiver, which is great. That means that instead of just getting 15 euros, you also don't have to pay for university. That's ideal. Dependents could be important if you're planning on taking a spouse or a child or something. You need to see if financial support is included. This gives you all the information that you need. You'll start an application, and for me, that meant I needed to brain dump everything. And so the two main sections are the statement of grant purpose and the personal statement, and then you have other little stuff. So I kind of put all the requirements in this page, and it was just like, what do I talk about? What is my project? You have to come up with your own project for some of it, or, if you're applying for a master's program, you talk about the master's program you're applying for. I have notes in here about editing. I have questions. I was editing with some of the award advisor people in my university, and they read what I had and they gave edits, and so that was in here. On the actual application, you have a title, and so you have to be sure that it fits in the 90 characters. You come up with the title. Then you have an executive summary. If you don't know what an executive summary is, and you're just like, oh, it's a summary, right? You should look it up. It took me a minute to figure that out. It is 1750 characters. You need to hit all the things they're asking for, but you also need to write it in a certain way. So you have to write that executive summary. I would suggest doing that after you have written both your personal statement and your actual application. Like, it should be the last thing you write, or if you're using it as like a blueprint, you should definitely edit it after you've written everything else. Then they have, questions like just when you applied to college. A key purpose is cultural ambassadorship. How will you engage? And you have to come up with that stuff. Specific ideas. And then I have like paragraphs that I didn't use just in here. Something to be knowledgeable of with Fulbright is that the cultural aspect is important. That's not just them like throwing in buzzwords or whatever. They care about your academics, but a big point of going abroad is to get that cultural exchange. So if your project doesn't have any cultural exchange built into it inherently, you're going to have to come up with something. There's also a describe your career and or educational plans after completing a Fulbright grant. Something key here is it shouldn't be completely different from your project. The project should be pretty logical in just your timeline of life, like what you did before and what you did after should be connected with the project. It shouldn't just be a blip, because then the Fulbright Commission is going to look at that and be like, oh, well, this person just wants to travel for free. They don't actually need this for their career or education. So you want to make sure that it makes sense with what you've done and what you want to do. And then you have the statement of grant purpose, which is 2 pages, and a personal statement, which is 1 page. And then there are certain formatting requirements, like you need headings on each page. At least when I did it, you should definitely double check that, because it would be horrible if you put in all this effort into making this beautiful application and then you had a couple of formatting things wrong and they just threw it out. So definitely double check that. You want your affiliation and letters, which I'll talk about in greater detail in a whole section. And then they have like lists, so your honors, fellowships, scholarships, and awards. So if you've been on the dean's list, that would count. If you had some sort of scholarship, like a merit-based scholarship, that would count. If you're an honors scholar, that would count. If you've won any sort of competition, even if it's not super related, if it's at all impressive, put it on there. If you're a member of like any honors groups, like honor fraternities or anything, put that on there. They also want to see your extracurricular and or community engagement activities. This is basically just like anything you put on your resume, right? Like if you've been in clubs, if you've done any sort of volunteering, if you've done outreach, if you've done tutoring, if you've, worked with underprivileged kids, anything like that, put it in there. If you've done anything that you weren't paid for, that should go in there. And I believe you want to put the dates as well. I think the application should specifically tell you for sure. Mine also asks for publication, exhibition, performance, and presentations. There will be extra details as to what that means, but so publications, pretty self-explanatory. If you had any academic publications, put that in there. Even if you've had non-academic publications, so like you had a story published or something like that, that could go in there. Exhibition, performance, that's for more creative stuff, usually, but not necessarily. Presentations, if you've ever done a poster, if you've ever been to a conference and presented, that kind of stuff would go in there for sure. You can even put like really big presentations for classes in there. Like I put something for my senior design in physics. Create a collision was what it was called. I had the date, and then I had a little blurb. My physics senior design team's final presentation, in which we revealed our demo we created to show intro-level physics students the connection between an object's properties and the elasticity of collisions. If it's related to your project, you could put it in there for sure. We have the statement of grant purpose. So the formatting requirements, at least for me, was you had to write statement of grant purpose, then you had to say who you were, where you were going to be, and what like category your project was. And then you had the title of it. And then you had to write about it for 2 pages. And you had another heading on the second page. And so the key thing here is when you're writing your statement of grant purpose, you need to talk about your project pretty in depth. You want to give them a bit of an idea of how it will go, timeline or whatever. But you also need to give them the background. You need to tell them why it's important, why you need to be doing it, and why you need to be in the country doing it. So whether that's because the program you're applying to is really, really specific and unique, or if you're doing an open study thing, why you need to be in Ireland. For me, I was doing historical Irish knitting techniques. Makes sense to be in Ireland for that. So this first paragraph really explained why I wanted to do this project and why I wanted to do it in Ireland. So I was talking about Irish knit history and how Ireland has a much more rich and diverse knit history than the United States does, and so that's why I wanted to come to Ireland to do this project. Anything that really explains like why you have to be abroad is helpful. You also want to build up your professional capabilities, essentially. You want to show them that you can do this project. So I was like, I have a Bachelor of Science degree in both fashion design and physics, or at least I will by the time I start this project. And so I'm like, okay, so I have some background in it. You can talk about projects you've done. So I was like, I design wearable technology for my fashion senior design collection. And you want to use anecdotes. You want to talk about them. You want to talk about things you did, whether it was like physical things that were impressive and or related to your project, or if it's talking about like hardship and things that you've gotten around, showing that you can deal with whatever the country throws at you. So like I was talking about how before one of my looks walked, a servo motor dress malfunctioned. So I was on my knees soldering the circuit board on the dress while my model was still wearing it. She was incredible. I didn't burn her, etc. So just like things like that will stand out, and it will show that you are able to deal with changing of things, and like nothing is going to go perfectly when you are abroad. And so showing that you can deal with that is very important. And just the more detail you give for each of these anecdotes, the more your application will stand out and the more you'll seem like a real person to whoever is reading this. It also helps to show that you have done some work, like you're really committed to this. So I was like, I have contacted Shimaseki and they've given me a list of businesses that have their machines. So these are knitting machines that I want to use in country. And so I was like, I have found these machines. You're proving that your project will be viable, and you're also proving that you've put some effort into this. You're not just throwing the project over your shoulder. And then, it just continues. Whew, 2 pages, man. So my project was divided into like historical knitwear and then incorporating wearable technology. So I had to explain both parts of that project. So I was talking about incorporating the wearable, incorporating the technology into knitwear to make wearables. I talked about why that was important, because it's an emerging field, but it has a lot of space for innovation. And I specifically talked about how wearable devices are usually utilized with woven fabrics rather than knit, so this is unique. And so pointing out why this project is important and why it hasn't been done before can be helpful. You are supposed to include a timeline. I had a very minimal timeline. I was like, first 3 months, travel to knitting hotspots and gather knitting knowledge. Months 4 to 9, work on knit tech prototypes. Like, that's very, very basic, but that's because I was running out of space. Like, you could definitely expand upon that. Definitely want to talk about the impact the project will have. So I was like, it'll have different research area impacts, combines my 2 passions. I'm drawing it back. I'm like, I'm a person. And I was talking about my future career plans because they asked about that. So I was talking about graduate school and what I'm going to do with that and how I can use knitwear in that. and even what I was going to do after graduate school. And then you really want to end with a bang, right? So I was like, with this project, I'll be interacting with people all over Ireland, learning from them and sharing my knowledge as well. This is good because you like that cultural exchange. The project will culminate with prototypes for knitwear with incorporated technologies that could improve people's lives. Also good, who doesn't like that? Best of all, this project is an opportunity to combine two vastly different fields, knowledge from two different countries, and the ability of many people into one concrete object. So I'm just summing it all up together. I'm like, if they dozed out because it was 2 pages long, that's fair. This paragraph should remind them of what I've said. It also helps to show that you know a little bit about what you're talking about. So I wouldn't get too technical because the people reading this aren't going to necessarily be from your field, but you can get a little bit technical just so they know that you know what you're talking about. So I was like, for instance, conductive yarn can be knit in the garment to create a circuit devoid of wires that moves as the person moves. If you're not familiar with circuitry, if you're not familiar with fabric, you can still kind of understand what I'm saying, but it might be a new idea. And then the last part is the personal statement, which is only a page. You have to have the heading again. There is no title for the project on this one because this is about you. And so this one is less about saying that you're knowledgeable and like that this project makes sense for you than it is about just saying who you are as a person. Like it should naturally come together that this project works for you and that this project is basically your brainchild, right? Like it should make sense that you want to do this project, but you're not trying to necessarily sell the project. You're trying to sell who you are as a person. So I talked about growing up on a farm. And, you know, it's always good to open with something that's like, makes people think. So I was like, I grew up on a farm and not a picturesque farm like Himela de la Reine. I'm talking about the kind of farm where you hold your own against a rooster when you're barely bigger than the rooster himself. It was better. It was more interesting. It involved blood and castration, but I was told to take that out. So, you know, teach their own. So I talked about growing up on a farm. I talked about how we didn't really have internet on the farm. I was told that this was a very powerful anecdote because it showed like growing up without certain things that people are used to. So I was like, because I was at my internetless home doing this research, I was talking about my physics research during the first COVID summer, doing my computational research took some inventiveness. I would take the car, drive 20 minutes away to a Raritan club and sit outside in the blazing sun, 90-degree weather, Fahrenheit, and research until my computer overheated. The building was closed, so I could not go inside, but I could use their internet. I actually used ice packs to like cool down my computer. I wanted to use them to cool me down, but I wouldn't break if I got hot. My computer would. So I talked about interning at a knitting machine company. So this is starting to be where I am explaining, you know, my knowledge in some areas. We've got the physics research. We've got the machine knitting. This all ties into my whole project. I talked about interning at CERN. Again, more physics, but it's also just kind of, you know, it's good to talk about your internship experiences because it'll show that you've done something with your life, basically. Something academic, something professional. And then my last paragraph was just kind of a mess, to be honest. I was like, you know, I've been doing fashion and physics. I've been sewing my clothes. I went to this fancy high school. I chose to do both passions, you know. I'm gonna go to Ireland. I'm gonna go to graduate school. Ba-da-da-da. The last little bit, though, is less about me, and it's kind of tying into what I talked about with the statement of grant purpose. So that's kind of good to make these two documents not entirely separate. So I was like, Ireland is the perfect place to do this, my project. Because of their rich history with hand knitwear and the existence of knit technology, the machines are not being utilized to their full potential yet, so I hope that my project will push Ireland in that direction and stimulate those I work with to begin integrating technology with knitwear. That will bring Ireland to the forefront of engineered knits, opening up possibilities in tech, medicine, and fashion. So this is helpful if you point out that like the country you're working in will also benefit. It won't just be you, right? It's like it's a give and take. Cultural exchange, educational exchange, professional exchange, they need to be getting something out of this as well. So I said I would talk a little bit more about affiliate and affiliate letters. This has nothing to do with if you're applying for like a master's program or an official program where your affiliate letter will just be your letter of acceptance. that's a pretty cut and dry sort of thing. You apply to the school, they say yes or they say no, you get a letter, you're good to go. But if you're doing an open study project, you have to find someone in your country that you want to go to who is doing something related to your project, who's willing to be your affiliate. And it can be hard to find. For me in particular, I don't know what other universities have set up, if they have a community of people, a network or something that you can go through. But basically for me, I was just on my own. I don't know anybody in Ireland, so I just emailed people. I looked up people, I looked up knitting people, I looked up electronics people, I looked up anything at all, even vaguely related to my project. I emailed the Shima people. I emailed 60 different people. It was a lot. And I started by emailing and asking for an affiliate. I explained who I was. I explained my project. And I was like, I'm looking for a mentor, basically. And a lot of people didn't respond, or they're like, oh, I gotta get back to you when school's back in session or whatever. I had some people say, oh, I can't. Then I had some people who did say yes, and, we worked our way down. And I had 2 university professors that said, oh, yes, I'm interested in your project. I have this expertise. You could work in my university to some capacity. Let's do this. And then they just have to write a letter. So there are requirements for the letter. There's not much. You can find it on the Fulbright website. But here, affiliation letter. Basically, so there's this whole information on how to get an affiliate letter. Basically, you just have to cold call, cold email people and hope somebody says yes. Basically what you need, it needs to be institutional letterhead, signed by the author. You can't just do email correspondence. And it essentially just says, this is who I am. I'm agreeing to work with this student in this capacity. Done. It's a very simple, clean, fast letter. You just need somebody who can get that institutional letterhead and who will work with you. You don't necessarily need it to submit your Fulbright application. It would be great if you had it. For me, I was notified that I was a semifinalist in February, I believe. And at that point, I asked I still hadn't gotten an affiliate. And I wasn't expecting to be a semifinalist, so I was like, oh, I won't have to worry about this. I had emailed a ton of people, and everybody had said no or hadn't gotten back to me. And so then I just kind of stopped worrying about it. I was like, there's no chance. But then I got the semifinalist thing, and I was like, oh no, I gotta figure this out. So I emailed my awards advisor, and I was kind of panicking. I was like, what do I do? Nobody's responding to me. I'm a semifinalist, what do I do? And she said, don't worry about it, you don't need one. The Ireland Fulbright Commission will assign you an advisor if your application is strong enough and they choose you. And I was like, that stresses me out. So I ended up emailing a ton more people, and I got somebody. It took a week or 2 or something. I got somebody, they sent me the letter, I uploaded it, it was fine. It did turn out, though, if I had waited and did not have a letter, then I most likely would not have gotten the Fulbright, because there were issues later on, and I was asking about that, and the head of the Ireland Fulbright Commission was like, you were misinformed. We do not assign affiliates. You gotta find your own. So I'm glad I went ahead and did that before, so I didn't have to worry about it. So you definitely need to find an affiliate. I mean, it is required for the Fulbright thing. You just got to start with the networking now. It ended up being really, really great because you're not asking for anything financial, right? You're just asking for somebody's time and effort, which is also very valuable, but at least it's not actual money. It ended up being very helpful because I made a lot of connections asking for mentorship, and people were like, well, I can't really commit to that level, but, we can have a chat. And so I had, 20 or so people in Ireland by the time I arrived that I was planning on meeting and discussing various technology and knitting things with. So it definitely helped me create a foundation for my project, which was very helpful. So it may seem like a pain. It may seem like a bit of a stressful chore because you're just randomly emailing people, but it ended up being good. Something else you may have to do, you also have to upload transcripts. That should be easy. You should have transcripts. You may have to do some sort of foreign language form. I didn't have to, so I can't really speak on that. Just be aware that that is a thing depending on your foreign language requirements. And another thing you have is recommendations. So you need 3 recommendations as part of the application. So good people to ask are your professors, anybody you've done research with, anybody you worked under in internships. I had one boss, so I had my boss for my knitting. I had a job for it was like 2 or 3 years in a knitting lab, and so she was one of them. And then I definitely had one professor that I did research with. I might have had 2, although I think I only had one, and then my third one was my boss for my CERN internship. So I tried to have a wide array. Like I had the knitting, I had the physics, people could speak on different strengths that I had. So that's also something to keep in mind. If your project is like math, you might want to have a professor that taught you math or a professor that you did math research with, rather than like 3 English professors. So there we go. That's a very brief overview of how I put together my Fulbright application and what it looked like. I hope this was helpful in any way. Honestly, it's such a chore to put together, like any sort of application. Like it takes a really long time that, there's no real way to do a video on the whole process because it was hours upon hours. But I hope this brief overview was helpful in some way. Thanks for hanging out with me. Good luck on your Fulbright application if that's what you're doing. And if you're applying for the Ireland one, let me know because I can give you way more information. Like send me I guess there aren't DMs on YouTube. Comment down below and we'll chat. All right. I'm Anne in Ireland and you've been watching me dissect my Fulbright application. Bye.